Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and a very warm welcome to Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. On today's show, we look at the obstacles James Gunn faces with his brand new DC Universe timeline. Timeline, not a reboot. Let's be absolutely clear here, and it's something that I warned you about before it was made official by James Gunn, that DC Universe isn't a reboot. DC Universe is literally the DCEU in a new timeline. It's exactly like Justice League, a little bit different, but it's Justice League. Basically, it's about kicking the Snyderverse into touch and painting everything in bright colours. So DC Universe is DCEU in another timeline. DC Universe is the DCEU rebranded. I told you this on multiple occasions. This little platform, this little nut job who does videos every day, told you this. Again, nobody believed me because you didn't want to hear it. But first of all, let's ask a deeper question. Out of all the creatives out there, was James Gunn, damn it, and producers, was James Gunn and Peter Safran the right two people to be the co-CEOs of DC Studios out of everyone in the industry today? Were they the right people to take this on? What I'm asking is, were there better people to take this role on? Is James Gunn a better choice than Mike DeLuca, Bruce Timm, Todd Phillips, who was also in the frame at one time as well? Was he the number one choice? No, he was not. James Gunn is a good but not great writer-director. He's good. He's made good Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I'm sure Volume 3 will be very good. People will love it. It'll be a great climax. The box office will be solid, and the Rotten Tomatoes scores from verified critics and fans will be very high. I'm sure about that. Why then, if he wasn't the number one guy to get the job, or woman, or whatever, right, why did he actually get this job? Because it's a popularity contest, everyone. He's very popular with the general audience, or that's how it's perceived. The truth is, he was more popular during the release of Guardians Volume 1 than he was in Guardians Volume 2. There are many people who don't like Guardians Volume 2. I'm not one of those people. I'm glad he went down a darker route with Peter Quill and the story of his father. I thought it was a very interesting, dark story. Although he did what he did in Peacemaker, bad dad. Hollywood love telling stories about bad daddies, but not bad mummies. Have you ever noticed that? And don't forget, James Gunn is a part of the extreme left narrative. There's no question about that. But anyway, I don't think he was the number one choice to take this job. I don't think Peter Safran was the number one producer in Hollywood to take this job. We thought David Zaslav understood, he was ruthless, and he would bring the top people in to run DC Studios. But is DC Studios a facade anyway? Well, from the outside looking in, it certainly looks so. But we have had a slate of Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. Now, the titles on this slate look interesting, but not everyone is pleased with this slate. There's YouTubers saying that there's a lot of red flags in this slate. The fact that he's aligned himself with comic book writers, extremists like Tom King, and other comic book writers are red flags to other people. So it's very, very interesting. But the slate, at the very least, looks interesting. But as I've said many times, slates are just words and titles. You still have to execute this stuff in the right way. So what's the number one obstacle James Gunn's plan with DC Universe is going to find? It's already there. He's already shot himself in the left foot. The removal of Henry Cavill as Superman put immense pressure on James Gunn. Why did it put immense pressure on James Gunn? Because Henry Cavill did the impossible. We never thought there would be an actor to replace Christopher Reeve in our hearts as Superman, and a lesser extent, Tom Welling. Probably the two most popular versions of Clark Kent since Christopher Reeve passed away, or at least stopped playing Superman. So Henry Cavill did the impossible and replaced Christopher Reeve in our hearts. Well, no, nothing can replace Christopher Reeve in our hearts as Superman. But you know, the next era of Superman. He's a great Superman. Even if you don't like his Superman movies, you like him as Superman. He's a perfect Superman. This is the reason James Gunn finds himself attacked on a daily basis, every hour, every minute, every second, by the Snyderverse stands and other fans. People are angry. He replaced Henry Cavill as Superman. Well, he hasn't replaced him yet, but he will do. This has put immense pressure on James Gunn. This was actually a terrible PR move, because putting Gunn in control of DC Studios was a PR move. As I say, it's a popularity contest. If you look at Christopher Nolan bringing in Zack Snyder to direct Man of Steel, you know, if there was a popularity contest right then, Zack Snyder wouldn't have won it. He'd have more chance of winning it now than he did then. It was not a popular choice. But in terms of having the most skill to put Superman up on the big screen, Zack Snyder was the most qualified, and that's why Nolan gave him the job. That's the whole point. So I believe that Zack Snyder is more qualified to make a Superman movie than James Gunn. But as I say, it's a popularity contest. But the decision to remove Henry Cavill as Superman is a PR disaster, because now James Gunn has to come up with a miracle casting as Superman. His decision has to be so right, so good, and so approved by every geek and nerd. And if it's not, basically people are going to be going on social media attacking him, laughing at him. I'm talking about James Gunn, not the person who gets cast. But this won't be great for the person who gets cast anyway. Because if people deem this is bad casting, you know, that guy isn't going to have an easy run of things either. And I mean, it's hard enough to play Superman anyway. You know, it's an iconic role. There's so much pressure in that role. You know, just as there is with playing Batman or James Bond or whatever iconic characters are out there. So already, if he does the wrong thing within the casting, he is toast. And don't forget, this will probably be the first casting with his new DC universe. This is the only movie that's got an attached writer and director, right? We know who's making Waller, but nobody really cares about Waller over on HBO Max anyway. Now, I will get to Batman Brave and the Bold, or Brave and the Bold, very, very soon, and discuss the problem with that movie against the Batman 2 as well. But there isn't a writer-director attached to Brave and the Bold. There's not a writer-director or anyone attached to any of the projects, and I find that very suspicious. Is James Gunn planning on writing and directing Brave and the Bold as well? Is it going to be that hands-on? Is this going to be a very slow built-up franchise? I know I don't want them to rush it. I don't want them to do an MCU, but you know, it's not going to be really taking shape for a very, very long time. Is the plan just to have the illusion of a DC Studios and a new DC universe so Zaslav can sell Warner Brothers Discovery to Universal or whoever? Is that part of the plan? It could be. It's not something I want. I want Warner Brothers to be owned by the right people who care about entertainment and care about film. I thought this was David Zaslav. I'm starting to think that maybe that's not the case, although he has made some good and bad decisions. I think the decisions, you know, that he's brought forward, some of them have been good and they make sense, and some of them have been rather dodgy, like bringing in James Gunn and Peter Safran, because that makes me feel like the old Warner Brothers pictures of Toby Emmerich and Walter Hamada are still running things behind the scenes, because James Gunn was brought in by Walter Hamada and Toby Emmerich. Let's not forget about that. So by recasting Cavill, he puts pressure on himself. Now, his excuse, his justification for this decision basically is Henry's age, because at first he started talking about a younger Superman. Now, he's basically backtracking from this, saying, well, he may not be 20 years old, he may be, any age. But let's look at Henry Cavill's age. He's about 38, 39. Let's just say, fuck it, he's 40. Let's pretend Henry Cavill is 40 years old. So if this is a 10-year franchise, a new timeline within the DCEU that's going to last at least a decade, Henry would be 50 by the time the first part was all over, or whatever they're planning, right? Well, do we actually think that Henry Cavill won't be in good shape and Henry Cavill's face still won't look youthful and good at 50 years old? We're not talking about 60. We're not talking about 70. We're not talking about 80, 90, 100. We're talking about 50 years old. I mean, I'm 50 years old, right? So he's going to look a lot better than I fucking do at my age right now. And don't forget, these people have got the best plastic surgeons, the best, gym professionals helping them. So I don't think it was that big a deal to have Henry Cavill play Superman for the next decade. And I think the whole thing is bullshit. As I say, this was a very dumb decision. There was no need for James Gunn to put this pressure on himself, and he's brought this pressure upon himself by recasting a very popular Superman. And it's not just that, is it? I mean, he was announced several months before as returning as Superman after being ousted as Superman. It's a very messy situation. And I think most people who look at it from the outside think this doesn't make sense. At the very least, he could have had a Man of Steel 2 in DC Elseworlds. Maybe even directed by Zack Snyder or anyone else. Of course, the return of Superman in the Black Adam post-credits scene wasn't without its controversies, considering that they decided to slightly have John Williams' Superman theme over that. And Snyderverse stands didn't like that either. Again, I understand their point of view. And Henry was coming out after that scene talking about a more inspirational Superman. And it wasn't like bringing him back didn't pose issues. It was this after Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut? Is it after Justice League 2, Justice League 3? Don't those films exist? Well, they don't exist because they've never been made. Do you just take him out the black costume? Do you keep him in the black costume? The whole fucking thing's a mess, whether you kept Cavill or not. To keep Cavill, for me, you have to keep Snyder. You have to allow Snyder to do his thing. So it's fucking messy and problematic. What do you do? How do you make a Man of Steel 2? It's all very difficult and complicated. I'm sure James Gunn looked at these situations because it's clear they don't want to bring Zack Snyder back. Unless I'm wrong and something's going to change, like a lot of fans think that. But from the way I'm looking at it, right, you could have a Man of Steel 2 after Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut, and I think that's what Henry always spoken about before he falls prey to the anti-life equation, that he has this one last adventure kind of thing. And that's what Henry wanted for the character. So it's plausible, but you do have to take him out of the black suit, unless you have a Superman movie with him within the black suit. And is that going to work? Is it going to be problematic? Is it going to confuse people? So there is that. So that issue wasn't without its issues. But the problem is he is very popular. So you've got to find a way around the Henry Cavill problem rather than say, oh, this is a bit too complicated. Let's just dump him and cast somebody new. Because now James Gunn puts himself under immense pressure to, as I say, to come up with the most perfect Superman casting. And if he dares and basically cast someone inclusive, like an actor of color, an Asian actor, a Latino actor, whatever, an Indian actor, because you can't trust these people to make a good, solid, logical piece of casting. If he does that, he's fucked. If he gets this casting wrong, he's fucked. His new universe is fucked. That's it. It's over. Cavill's casting wasn't met with that much controversy. Some kind of bleated some racism because he was a British actor, but most of those people were quietened down very quickly when we first saw Henry in that first image dressed in the costume. He looked fucking beautiful. Great costume, great Superman, great casting. Zack Snyder's casting for these Justice League characters was bang on. I mean, you can bleat about Ezra Miller, but apart from Ezra Miller's casting, I think we can all say the other pieces of casting were fucking perfection. So, I mean, Michael Shannon as Zod. I mean, you know, so basically, already James Gunn has made a very, very irrational, illogical decision. So we'll see who he casts as Superman. It's got to happen very, very soon. So let's move to this second obstacle facing James Gunn. And that's Brave and the Bold, the Batman in the new DC Universe versus Matt Reeves, the Batman 2. I don't understand how you can have two separate Batmen in two separate timelines. I don't see how this is going to work. Now, you could say, why can't they both be successful? Well, in the law of averages, when you've got two of the same thing, one of them is going to be more popular than others, and it will hurt the other brand. Because even though it's all part of DC, you know what people are like. I mean, you've got Snyderverse fans hating on DCEU. You know, you've got Matt Reeves, the Batman fan, saying he's the best Batman ever, better than this one. Better. So, even though everyone's a DC fan, ultimately there are segments of the DC fandom splintered off, as we already know. So again, with Robert Pattinson's casting as Batman being really, really popular, and I think just like when Ben Affleck was announced, there was a few people saying, you know, Twilight, which I thought was dumb. How can you judge an actor on another role he's played? I mean, Jesus Christ, it's ridiculous. But he's a great Batman. I mean, I think Matt Reeves photographed him beautifully in the film. He looks brilliant. He works for the Batman that Matt needed. So, with that said, again, they have to come up with the perfect casting. Again, there's so much pressure. And this is the problem. I mean, the logical decision would have been for James and Matt to have some kind of compromise where he brings Robert's Batman into one universe, and the DC universe is a reboot, and basically Matt Reeves, the Batman, is the Batman of the DC universe, which is not going to happen, we know now, and Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is the Joker of this new universe, and bring everything together. Instead of that, they've got DC Elseworlds and DC Universe. Now, I like the idea of DC Elseworlds. I think that's where the real money is going to be for David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery. But this, my friends, is a huge obstacle for them because Matt Reeves doesn't want to be involved in somebody else's vision. Now, if Matt Reeves could have run the whole thing, that would have been different. So clearly, this was never an option in the first place. And I'm guessing, you know, and this is the problem. You've got established movies already there. See, and, you know, Zaslav wants Todd Phillips' Joker sequel. You know, Zaslav wants Matt Reeves' The Batman sequel because the first movies did really, really well. So he wants some more of that bacon and cheese again, right? It's good business to give those movies sequels. There's nothing wrong with it, but you have an issue now because you could introduce, you know, because they've already introduced the Joker, kind of, into Matt Reeves' The Batman universe. I'm sure the Brave and the Bold will introduce their own Joker, and you've got Joaquin Phoenix's Joker running around. Here's the problem. I don't think anyone's going to get Joker as right as Joaquin Phoenix has. In a lot of ways, he's the most right he's ever been, because even though he's kind of an Elseworldy version of Joker, you know, because Joker in the comics mostly hasn't had a name, nobody knows his backstory. I think that it's very difficult to have three Jokers in three different universes. So all this situation is difficult. It's all very well talking about the multiverse, or as you Americans call it, the multiverse. But bloody hell, you really do kill the English language, don't you? No offense, I love my American subscribers, of course, I'm kidding. But yeah, this is the problem here. There's too much of the same thing. And I think it's a problem. And I think the multiverse works very well in paperback, in comic book form, in graphic novel form. But when you bring it to live action, and people will argue, well, what about everything everywhere all at once? Yeah, that's different. That's not a comic universe, and it's done very, very differently in the way of doing a multiverse story. But I think it's very, very difficult to have a franchise, different franchises from different timelines and different universes. Will there ever be any crossovers? Who knows? People are obsessed with crossovers. Me, not so much. I want to see great stories before anything else. So ultimately, this is the problem. This is the problem they're going to have, because people will compare whoever they cast as Batman in Brave and the Bold. Now, we already know who's going to be Robin. That's kind of, exciting. And it's Damian Wayne. That's exciting. That's interesting. Again, it's all about execution. So it's clear at the very least that we know Matt Reeves and James Gunn have had conversations so they don't tread on each other's creative toes. At the very least, that's a positive thing. But we're getting the Batman 2 in 2025, the same year as Superman Legacy. So when are we actually getting the Brave and the Bold? No writer, no director is attached. So we're not getting it in 2025, that's for sure, because that would be suicidal with the Batman 2 coming out that year. So that's not going to happen. So you're either looking at 2026 or 2027. That's a very long time. Will we get any other DC Universe movies in 2025? It's looking unlikely unless something or a couple of things are announced very, very quickly. And it doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon. So it could be 2025 is just the year of the Batman 2 and Superman Legacy. Next year is the year of Penguin on HBO Max. And as I said earlier, the Joker sequel, Joker Folie à Deux. So with that said, with all these different versions of Batman, and are they going to say, right, you've got a Joker there, so we won't do a Joker here? Which again, kind of rips something away from the Brave and the Bold universe if you decide to go down that direction. And this is another obstacle for James Gunn's DC universe. And then there's the whole Tanashi coach J.J. Abrams Black Superman thing, which officially is still in active development. Is that still a thing? Well, officially, it's still a thing. You're going to have one Superman in Superman Legacy, and then you're going to have a Black Clark Kent in another timeline. Again, you're gonna get one thing that's more popular than the other, and it's very unlikely. I was going to say it's very unlikely the black version of Superman will be more popular than the other version, but you never know. There could be two black Supermen in this universe. Who knows? It would be ironic if Tanashi Coates' Superman ends up being more popular than the Superman Legacy version, because Tanashi Coates may be a social justice writer, and lots of people have issues with that, but I think he's an interesting writer, and I don't think he should be diminished or just kind of slept on just because of his politics. I think it's interesting. He may come up with a very interesting story. He may kind of create this kind of Black Panther version of Superman. Who knows? Funnier things have happened. But this film, this Tanashi Coates film, may never happen, and they just haven't decided on what to do with it. This is my theory. I believe they're not going to make Tanashi Coates Superman of Colour. I think they're going to intermingle the two, and James Gunn's creativity process will take some elements, maybe, from what Coates was doing, which means there may be a compromise here, and James Gunn may actually cast a Superman of colour. Excuse me. If he casts a Superman of colour, he's fucked. Publicly, he's fucked. If he casts an inclusive Superman, he's fucked. So be very well aware of the Ta-Nehisi Coates Black Superman situation and what they decide to do. But that day that James Gunn announces the casting for his brand new Superman is going to be a huge day on social media, especially Twitter. The platform will probably break. That's if Elon Musk hasn't decided if we don't pay for Twitter, we can't be on it by now. Basically, let's talk about something that's very, very interesting. Because the whole point of Shazam, the first Shazam film, was to colour up the DCEU, make it a brighter, wackier franchise like the MCU and Deadpool, because Toby Emmerich, Walter Hamada were very obsessed with Deadpool. We saw what they attempted to do with David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Damn, my throat's terrible, and that's no good, is it? But yeah, so that basically Shazam was the answer to Snyder's, darker, realistic take on the superhero genre. So it's kind of karma, if you like, that it's Shazam Fury of the Gods that's failed at the box office, because what they were trying to do is kick the Snyderverse into touch and colour it up. It's exactly what they tried to do with Justice League and Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 84. They kicked Snyder's Wonder Woman, darker, more realistic Wonder Woman, more brutal warrior type of Wonder Woman, into touch, and they coloured her up, and it didn't work. Everything they've tried to move away from the Snyderverse hasn't worked. Why? Because Zack Snyder is better than most of the directors that they've brought in to replace him. And that is the factual situation. Because David F. Sandberg is a solid enough director, but he's not a visionary like Zack Snyder, and that's the point. So I think the failure of Shazam Fury of the Gods is absolutely karma from that point of view. And you look at the first Shazam that only made just over, 300 million, which isn't a great amount, considering Shazam was meant to be like the new kiddie version, the new MCU version of the DCEU. And that is an issue, because that says that Walter Hamada's plan, Peter Safran's plan, Toby Emmerich's plan to take the DCEU, colour it up and move away from the Snyderverse didn't work. Snyder's movies made more money than Shazam and Shazam 2 put together. What does that tell you? What is the message there? The truth of the matter is that if you don't like what Snyder's doing, if he wasn't bringing enough bacon into the pot, into the bank, if it was too controversial and too divisive, then you should have just said, let's start again. That's the point. This is why the most recent DC Extended Universe movie is a flop. That's why the past 4 and 5 movies, including Shazam Fury of the Gods, have been flops. Because they decided to take what Snyder did and change it. And that was never going to work. If you don't want to stick with Snyder, you've got to start again, and start again really quickly, or keep on going with him. Instead, they wanted to take what he had, and we saw that with Justice League, and rebrand it. And this is what DC Universe by James Gunn is. It's another rebranding. And I warned you about this. I told you the DCEU, the DC Universe, is DCEU rebranded. And I was right. Why aren't they doing a reboot? Because they're lazy and greedy. Basically, DC Universe is the DCEU rebranded. That's what it is. And that's what I told you it is. Because they're lazy. They don't want to start again. And because they've got the Flash movie already there, they're going to use that movie, which it was always going to do, which is to change the DC Extended Universe's timeline. This was the Walter Hamada plan. Now it's the James Gunn plan, which means it's not really the James Gunn plan. It's the laziest plan. It's the David Zaslav plan, to do things quickly, to change things up quickly. He's giving you this brilliant, polished first slate for DC Universe, calling it Gods and Monsters. But what kind of a plan is it when we're still really in the DCEU, but just in another timeline? Now, by keeping it as the same franchise, but in a new timeline and not a reboot, they can drop and keep whatever they want. Some things will remain canon, like James Gunn's Suicide Squad universe. That's another piece of pressure he's putting on himself, because people are saying Henry Cavill gets axed, but your stuff stays. Of course it does. He created it. He's in charge. He can do whatever the fuck he wants. So these are the problems in the way of the James Gunn DC Universe plan. Can it work? Is he the best man for the job? Only time will tell. Let me know what you think about all of this. This has been Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wife. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.